Hello, I'm Nina Warren, and I was supposed to live a peaceful, ordinary life in our small village until the day I gave up the man I loved and rewrote my fate with blood, fire, and tears. That morning, the sun hadn't even crested over the hills, but the warmth in the air clashed with a chill growing inside me. My parents were bustling in the kitchen, their voices low, tense. My younger sister, Claire, sat silently at the table, her hands folded demurely, her eyes flicking to mine with veiled expectation. It was the day we were meant to draw lots. One slip of paper would marry its holder into a powerful family in Stateview, while the other would doom her to remain in our backwater village of Willow Creek as a guard. It should have been just a family tradition rooted in an old military bond, but I knew better. I had already lived through this once. In my last life, I drew the winning lot. I married Gavin Shelton, the admired son of a retired general, and became the envy of everyone who knew me. Claire stayed behind as the village guard. Less than a month later, during a routine night patrol, she was attacked by a drunken bachelor from the next town over. What followed was too dark, too cruel for any sister to forget. The pain and shame drove her to take her own life. Before she died, she sent a telegram to Gavin, claiming I had rigged the drawing and destroyed her future. That letter poisoned his heart. From that moment on, he changed. His love turned to hatred. I remember kneeling with my young son Mason in front of Claire's grave as Gavin screamed at us to confess. His voice echoed. "It should have been you, Nina. You should have died, not her." And then found that same man, brought him to the grave, and forced me to endure the same fate my sister had, right there, with my child watching. Mason cried and begged on his knees. Gavin choked him to death. So when I opened my eyes again and saw the folded slips of paper on the table, I didn't hesitate. I knelt before my parents and said with unwavering clarity, "Mom, Dottie want to be the village guard. Let Claire marry Gavin Shelton." The room went still. My father frowned in confusion, his brows drawn tight with disbelief. Claire blinked, clearly startled. Before either of them could say a word, I continued, "This is what I want. Please don't make me draw lots." My mother opened her mouth, but I caught the flicker in her eyes' guilt. In my past life, they had tampered with the drawing to ensure I won. They had favored me all along. My father sighed deeply. "Nina, are you sure?" I smiled faintly and nodded. Completely. My chest ached, but my heart was steady. It had to be this way. Just as I exhaled with relief, the front door slammed open with a bang that made all of us jump. Gavin Shelton stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, the early morning light framing him like a soldier returned from war. His boots were dusty, his shirt wrinkled, and his dark eyes scanned the room before locking onto Claire. "Claire," he called, crossing the threshold in 3 long strides before wrapping his arms around her. His voice trembled with emotion. "Thank God, we made it. You're alive." I was so afraid I was too late. Then, as if the weight of the world dropped from his shoulders, he fell to his knees before my father. "Sir," he said, his eyes reddened, "I know you and your wife have always favored Nina, but I only love Claire. If I can't marry her, I'll never marry. Please let her be the one." That moment hit like a sledgehammer. In my previous life, he had begged to marry me. Now, with the timeline shifted, he remembered too. He had been reborn just like me. My lips parted, but my voice failed me. I whispered his name, Gavin, but he turned on me with a glare as sharp as broken glass. "Don't be delusional, Nina. I would rather die than marry a woman like you again." The coldness in his tone was too familiar. It was the same voice he'd used before dragging me and Mason to that grave. My parents were caught off guard, but my mother stepped forward, flustered. "Gavin, there's been a misunderstanding. Nina's given up her chance. Claire is yours now. Go speak to your father, make it official." Gavin blinked. For a second, it was as if he hadn't processed her words. Then he turned to Claire and pulled her close, murmuring in disbelief, "I can finally marry you." Finally. I watched them, feeling like an outsider in my own home. The tenderness in his touch once belonged to me. Now it was hers. They left together. As Gavin turned back for one last look, his gaze lingered on me. There was something there, confusion, suspicion, maybe even regret, but he said nothing. My mother stood awkwardly before me. "Nina, there will be someone better for you," she said, though her voice wavered. I looked up at my father. "Dad, I want to stay here with you. For the rest of your life." He hesitated, the lines on his face deepening, then gave a quiet nod. He didn't say it aloud, but I knew. Deep down, he believed I had deserved the better lot. That was why they had tampered with the drawing the first time. They had given me what I wanted at the cost of my sister's fate. A fate I now carried myself. That night, I lay in bed staring at the old wooden beams above me, thinking about the path ahead. In my past life, there was a man from a neighboring town, short, stocky, and perpetually filthy, known as the village ragpicker. No one wanted anything to do with him. But I had learned too late that he wasn't who he appeared to be. Luke Yates was the son of a powerful shipping magnate, hiding his identity to escape a political vendetta. After Claire's death, he returned to the city and, with shrewd business moves, built an empire that left the entire province in awe. In this life, I had to find him. I had to tie my fate to his, not for wealth, not for revenge, but because he was my only chance to truly escape the nightmare repeating itself. The next day, as I walked to the market, I ran into Claire and Gavin. Claire wore a bright red cheongsam, a sleek modern cut that accentuated her waist and drew attention from every passerby. Her smile was triumphant. Gavin held her arm, and his gaze was filled with pride. "Sister," Claire called out sweetly, her voice dripping with false innocence. "Guess what? Gavin and I are getting married in 5 days. I expect you to be there." I clenched my hands behind my back. "I'm busy with village guard duties," I replied, forcing the tremor from my voice. She pouted. "Come on, sis. If you don't come, I'll toss out the bracelet Grandma gave you." My stomach dropped. That bracelet. It was the only thing Grandma left me before she passed. Claire knew it mattered more than anything. I turned to leave, not wanting to argue, but she stepped in front of me again. "And while we're talking heirlooms," she added smugly, "shouldn't you return the jade pendant Uncle Shelton gave you? After all, I'm going to be his daughter-in-law now." I felt the blood drain from my face. That pendant wasn't a love token. It was a parting gift from Mr. Shelton to me alone, back when he believed I would be his daughter-in-law. "No," I said firmly. "It belongs to me." Gavin frowned, seemingly uncomfortable. "Claire, I'll get you something better." "No," she insisted, voice quivering. "I just want this one thing." Before I could stop her, she lunged, yanked the red cord from my neck, and smashed the jade against the ground. The sharp edge of the broken cord left a stinging cut across my collarbone. I gasped, clutching my neck. Claire crouched beside me, tears in her eyes. "I can't believe you smashed it, sis. It was Uncle Shelton's last keepsake." "How could you?" Villagers gathered. Whispers turned into disgusted comments. What kind of woman would sabotage her sister's engagement? "She's jealous, obviously. I wouldn't let my son marry a woman like that even if she begged." I bent down silently, gathering the shards in shaking hands. Gavin stared down at me with open disdain. "If you know what's good for you, Nina, don't push me again. You wouldn't want a repeat of what happened last time." My heart lurched. He remembered. He remembered everything. As he and Claire walked away, my vision blurred with unshed tears. I cupped the shattered jade in my palms and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mr. Shelton. I couldn't protect it. I couldn't protect anything. But that ends today." That night, I couldn't sleep. The shattered jade pendant lay wrapped in a handkerchief on my nightstand, a silent reminder of humiliation, of loss, and of how little anything I once treasured seemed to matter anymore. The moonlight filtering through the slats of my window danced over the cracks in the floorboards, and my chest ached with an emptiness I couldn't name. I turned over, but the weight of something missing dragged me back up again. I padded barefoot to the small chest beneath my bed, the one where I kept the bracelet Grandma gave me before she passed. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. The inside was empty. The air around me seemed to tighten, suffocating. I stared at the void for a moment, stunned into stillness, before my voice ripped through the silence. "Claire," I breathed, my blood going cold. "What have you done?" By morning, I didn't bother pretending. I stormed into the living room, still in my nightdress, my hair barely pinned, heart beating like thunder in my ears. Claire sat at the table peeling an orange, looking so relaxed it made my fists clench. She glanced up and smiled sweetly, as if the night before had never happened. "Good morning, sister. You're up early." My voice cut through her performance. "Where's my bracelet?" She didn't flinch. She even seemed amused, as though she'd been waiting for this moment. "Oh, that old thing?" she asked with feigned innocence. "I sold it. To the junkman. Got 3 cents for it. Bought 2 eggs and a stick of candy." My chest constricted, and I took a step forward before I even realized it. "You knew what it meant to me. You knew." She bit into the orange segment and spoke with her mouth half full. "I don't know why you're so attached to dead people's trash. That bracelet was ugly anyway. I did you a favor." My hands shook at my sides. "Why are you doing this? Haven't I given you everything? Gavin, the wedding, the city life, wasn't that enough?" Claire stood, her calm mask slipping. Her eyes, once the soft brown of a doe's, had hardened into glass. "Enough," she hissed. "You think this is about Gavin? This is about you always being the favorite. Always the golden girl. Even when you fail, they make excuses for you. I had to work, clean, cook, take care of mom and dad while you got to dream. When they sent you to the provincial capital and left me hurrido, you know what happened." She leaned in close, her breath warm and bitter on my cheek. "You know, because I made sure you remembered. I made sure you suffered. Now it's your turn again." I reeled back, staring at her face like it belonged to a stranger. "You were reborn too," I whispered. "You knew all along what would happen if I stayed." Claire grinned like a predator cornering its prey. "Of course I did. And I made sure it would happen again if you got in my way." My heart was pounding, not just from fear, but from something more dangerous clarity. If I stayed here any longer, I wouldn't survive. She wasn't just bitter, she was poisonous. And I wasn't going to wait around to drink the next cup. I packed a small satchel that night, stuffing in a spare dress, some coins I'd hidden beneath the floorboard, and a letter from my parents. I left it under my pillow and signed, but clear. I'm going to find my own path. Don't worry about me. I didn't look back. Willow Creek in the early hours was wrapped in fog, the dew heavy on the grass, every tree branch dripping like it had mourned me overnight. I walked fast, the hem of my skirt brushing against my knees, my shoes kicking up dirt and gravel along the road. The train station was still miles away, but I didn't stop to rest. I couldn't. Every second felt like it might be the one where Claire would wake and realize I was gone. I reached the station by sunrise, breathless and aching, and boarded the earliest train heading toward the direction of Clearview County. My memory led me like a compass, one that pointed not north, but straight toward the man I needed to find. When I arrived in the outskirts of Clearview, the town looked exactly as I remembered it from my past life: modest homes, the faint scent of coal and wheat in the air, and old wooden fences in desperate need of paint. But I wasn't here for sightseeing. I asked around, quietly, cautiously. "That weird junkman who lives by the creek?" "Short, scruffy guy with a limp?" someone finally said. "You mean Luke? He's always poking through the landfill past the South Bridge." It didn't take long to find him. The moment I saw his hunched figure, sorting through discarded tin cans and rusted bicycle parts, my throat closed up. Dressed in threadbare denim, his hair matted with dirt, and a sharp smell of iron and grease clinging to him, Luke Yates didn't look like a future tycoon. But I knew better. I took a step forward. "Luke Yates," I called, and he turned slowly, one eyebrow lifting warily as he sized me up. "I know who you really are," I continued, voice low, deliberate. "You're not just some scavenger. You're the heir of the Yates Shipping Company." son of Walter Yates of Stateview Port Authority. You've been in hiding to avoid retaliation from your family's enemies. I remember it all. He didn't speak. His eyes darkened slightly, shoulders tensing. I didn't give him the chance to walk away. If you don't want your identity exposed, marry me.
Right now.
I'll keep your secret. I can protect you if you let me. His gaze was unreadable. A flicker of something shock? Amusement? Resignation passed over his face. He studied me like a man trying to determine if the bridge ahead was safe enough to cross. Who sent you? He asked finally. No one, I replied. I came because I need you. And you need me. The silence that followed was long, stretched taut between us like a tripwire. Then he nodded. Just once. Follow me. That day, Luke didn't ask questions. He brought me to a quiet widow's house on the edge of town, Mrs. Bell, a gentle older woman who welcomed me with a warm smile and fresh cornbread. He gave me clean clothes and a basin of warm water to wash the blood from my neck. I'll come for you tomorrow morning, he said gruffly, before vanishing into the dusk like a ghost. The next day, we walked into the local records office and signed our names in ink that felt heavier than history. Nina Warren, Luke Yates, husband and wife. No ceremony, no flowers, no witnesses beyond the sleepy-eyed clerk. But in that moment, I felt more married than I ever had before. I mailed my letter to Willow Creek and watched the postmaster stamp it with finality. By the time Gavin and Claire's wedding day came, I was long gone. Gavin, no doubt, looked from a but I imagined my father's face as he stared him down with quiet disappointment. She's gone, he would say. You made your choice. Don't disturb her again. I pictured Gavin's disbelief, the confusion twisting his perfect features. But I didn't regret a single thing. I had escaped, and for the first time in 2 lives, I was finally free. I didn't expect to see them again. Not so soon. Not like this. Married life in Willow Creek with Luke was nothing like what I had known before. It didn't sparkle with grandeur or social prestige, but it wrapped around me like a warm quilt stitched from quiet kindness. Luke was a man of few words, but the way he brought me fresh vegetables from the market, the way he stacked chopped wood neatly outside the door before sunrise, the way he poured hot water for my bath without needing to be asked, those gestures spoke volumes. I was surprised by how quickly our routines fell into rhythm. He let me rest during the day, and when I insisted on helping, he showed me how to patch old blankets or sift through scraps with practiced hands. He never touched me without permission, never raised his voice, and never looked at me like I owed him anything. And slowly, against the quiet thrum of village life, something inside me began to heal. The wound left by Gavin's betrayal, the splintered scar that Claire had reopened again and again, dulled. I didn't forget, but I stopped bleeding. Then, like a thorn brushing against skin you thought had hardened, the past pricked me again. It happened in Clearview's open market 6 weeks later, while Luke and I were shopping for winter grain. I was haggling over potatoes with a kind old farmer when a shadow swept across the ground behind me. I turned instinctively and froze. Gavin Shelton. His hair was combed back, suit perfectly pressed, his frame commanding and tall as ever. Claire clung to his arm in a cream lace dress, her belly slightly rounded now, her smile frozen when her eyes landed on me. I was dressed in a simple navy skirt and a soft blouse Luke had bartered for from a traveling merchant. My hair was tied back loosely, the sun warming my face. I should have looked like a pauper next to her finery. But the way Gavin stared at me wasn't pity. It was confusion, regret, possession. I heard you got married, he said without greeting, voice low, tight with disbelief. I held his gaze, my hand steady despite the pulse hammering in my throat. I did, I replied evenly. And I have no intention of changing that. Claire stepped forward, draping herself closer to him with a theatrical sigh. Sister, how could you? She said with a tremble in her voice. You chose a man like that? A fool? Were you so heartbroken over Gavin and me that you threw your life away? The crowd around us began to still, turning to listen with a mixture of curiosity and small-town hunger for scandal. Luke isn't a fool, I said calmly, glancing at the man just behind me. He was talking to a vendor and hadn't noticed the commotion yet. He treats me with respect. Something I rarely received from either of you. Claire's expression twisted. Respect? From a ragpicker? She laughed, loud and forced. Our families are already being ridiculed. Mother and father were so ashamed, they left the village. Do you think marrying trash makes you noble? No, I said, my voice cutting like a blade through silk. But I'd rather live a quiet, honest life than stay shackled to people who think cruelty is a privilege. Gavin stepped forward abruptly and grabbed my wrist, his fingers tight and cold. Nina, you're coming with us. I'll fix this. You'll divorce that man. We'll find you a real home in Stateview. Claire and I let go of me. I snapped, yanking my arm away. My heart was thundering, not from fear, but fury. You think you can fix anything? You killed my child, Gavin. You made me kneel at a grave for a crime I didn't commit. You watched me break and didn't blink. Whatever debt I owed you, I've paid with interest. Claire's voice rose sharply, acidic and grating. He only did it because he thought you betrayed me. You poisoned him against me. I never betrayed anyone, I said, stepping back, the crowd tightening in around us. But you did. Again and again. Before the confrontation could escalate, a deep voice rang out behind me. Let go of my wife. The air shifted. Gavin's hand dropped from my wrist as Luke stepped forward, his expression thunderous. Gone was the quiet ragpicker. His posture was stiff and commanding, his eyes sharp as polished steel. Behind him, 5 local militiamen followed closely, their presence casting a ripple through the onlookers. Guns were slung low but visible, and suddenly no one dared whisper. Who the hell are you? Gavin demanded, his voice losing its composure. Luke didn't answer him. He stepped beside me, gently lifted my hand to inspect the red marks on my wrist, then turned back to Gavin with deadly calm. The man who'll bury you if you ever touch her again. Claire faltered, her mouth twitching, but Luke's presence swallowed the space between us all. He wasn't acting. He wasn't bluffing. This wasn't just a quiet man who collected junk. This was the son of a dynasty, a man forged by fire and strategy, hiding in plain sight because he had nothing to prove. She chose me, Luke said plainly, and I'll protect her until my last breath. Claire's smile cracked. Her fingers curled protectively around her growing belly, and I saw the jealousy flash behind her eyes like a feral thing. You married him? She said, her voice shrill with disbelief. You? After everything, you get a man like him? Her words came unhinged, unfiltered. You were supposed to suffer. You were supposed to rot in a village, be mocked and used and broken. Not this. Luke stepped slightly in front of me, his body a silent barrier. We're done here, he said. Leave now, or I'll have you escorted out. Gavin looked at me one last time. Something flickered in his eyes, fear, loss, recognition of what he had thrown away. But it didn't matter. I turned without another word, letting Luke guide me away, my spine straight, my head high, my heart swelling not with pride, but with the deep and quiet truth that I had escaped a fate that once felt written in stone. On the way home, I sat beside Luke on the ox cart, the sun melting into the distant hills, casting long golden streaks across the road. He handed me a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. What's this? I asked, blinking away the residual tension. A comb, he said quietly. You've been tying your hair with scraps. You deserve better. I unwrapped it slowly, a delicate peachwood comb, its teeth carved with subtle floral patterns. My throat tightened. I didn't respond right away. I just leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder as the wind carried us back toward our home. The road behind us might still echo with ghosts, but ahead, for once, was peace. The days after the confrontation passed like slow, golden syrup, quiet and oddly serene. Fall painted the trees outside our cottage in rich ambers and rusted reds, and for the first time, in what felt like lifetimes, I woke without a clenched chest or a fear pressing behind my ribs. Luke continued with his work scouting materials, overseeing shipments no one knew were meant for more than scrap, and I found myself slipping into the gentle rhythms of domestic life. I baked bread from scratch, hung laundry under the sun, and even taught myself to embroider from a book he quietly left on my nightstand. And yet, beneath the comfort, an unease lingered like mist clinging to fields at dawn. It wasn't that I didn't trust the peace, I just didn't believe it could last. Not with Claire still out there. Not with the way she'd stared at me, pregnant, furious, and unwilling to lose. One morning, as I folded a shawl into our traveling trunk, preparing for our planned move to the capital, Luke had finally agreed it was time to re-enter his world. This time with me beside him, I heard the low creak of the back gate. I paused. The wind had been mild all morning, no reason for the latch to shift. I stepped to the window, lifted the curtain, and saw it. A black sedan idling at the edge of the woods, dust rising around its tires like smoke. Two men leaned against the trunk, smoking with a casualness that set my skin crawling. I turned on instinct and called for Luke. He appeared from the backyard, sleeves rolled, sweat at his temples, his expression hardening as soon as I told him. "They've found us," he muttered, almost to himself. "Pack only what matters. We'll leave before dark." But dusk came too late. I never made it to the second trunk. A hand clamped over my mouth the moment I stepped into the back room. The bitter sting of chloroform filled my nose before I could scream, and the world tilted sideways, melting into a cold, oily black. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the ceiling-peeling paint, iron beams, and rusted hooks that swayed slightly with each gust of wind. I was tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned machine shop. Chains clinked with the draft. A puddle of old oil shimmered near my feet. The back of my head throbbed with a dull ache, and my wrists burned against the rope. I twisted, but nothing gave. Then I heard Ithiel's clicking against concrete, slow and deliberate. Claire emerged from the shadows, hair curled, lipstick perfect, like she'd come from a party and brought hell with her. "You always were the stubborn one," she purred, circling me. "I warned you not to play house with trash." "What do you want?" I asked, my voice hoarse but steady. Claire crouched in front of me, eyes wide with mock sincerity. "Justice," she said, smiling as if she were delivering good news. "Fairness. A little. Balance." She stood, snapped her fingers, and three men stepped into the light, strangers with dead eyes and twitching smirks. "Do you remember them?" she asked sweetly. "No." "Oh, but I do. I remember how they looked in the last life. I brought them back just for you." My blood turned to ice. The faces, different but familiar, contorted in ways that mocked memory. I pulled at the ropes until my skin split. "Claire, Daunt Plessithis, isn't you?" Her face twisted into something grotesque. "Isn't it? Isn't this exactly what you always feared I could become?" She leaned close enough that I could smell the perfume on her neck. "You took everything from me. Again. Gavin's respect. Our parents' sympathy. And now you get a rich husband who treats you like a queen? While I'm stuck watching my belly swell and my future rot beside a man who doesn't even look at me the same?" "That's not my fault," I whispered. "None of it was." "Oh, but it is," she hissed, and her palm cracked across my face with such force that I saw stars. "I let them touch me the first time. I planned it. I drank the poison. I wrote the letter. Every piece of ITI crafted the story that made Gavin hate you. And it worked. It was beautiful. Until you ruined it." Tears welled in my eyes, not from the sting, but from the truth. She had orchestrated my death. All of it. Why? I asked, the word a breath. Why go so far? Claire's face twisted in rage. "Because you were always the one they loved. You were always the one with the pretty smile, the good grades, the easy praise. I was invisible, and I couldn't stand it." She snapped her fingers again. One of the men stepped forward, leering. "Please," I begged, panic breaking loose in my voice now. "Claire, You don't have to do this. Oh, she said coldly. But I do. The man reached for me. I turned my face away and braced myself. But the door burst open with a deafening crash. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room filled with the sound of boots, of a struggle, of fists against flesh and the crack of bones. A second later, the ropes fell from my wrists.
Luke.
He was there. His face was scratched, one arm bloodied, but his eyes, God, his eyes were full of fury and fear. You're okay, he breathed, lifting me into his arms. I've got you. I've got you. Behind him, Gavin stood frozen, breathing hard, fists clenched, staring at Claire with something that looked like horror. Claire backed away, her lips parted in a silent scream as Gavin approached. I heard everything, he said. I heard what you did. You destroyed everything. You lied to me. You let me God. His voice broke. I let Nina die. I believed you. Claire screamed and lunged at him, but Luke blocked her before she could touch me. Then the police arrived, their sirens splitting the night, flashing lights casting everything in dizzying reds and blues. Later, I stood beside Luke as they loaded the handcuffed gangsters into the van. Claire had collapsed into a heap on the floor, screaming and thrashing like a feral thing. Gavin was arrested for aiding the abduction, for the part he'd played. His eyes never left me. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. I didn't see. You never wanted to, I said, my voice devoid of anger, just tired. That's what made it so easy for her. He bowed his head, and they led him away. Claire's cries followed them like a curse echoing into the trees. I clutched Luke's hand, my body trembling from the adrenaline crash. He wrapped his coat around me and whispered into my hair, You're safe now. I swear to you, you're never going through anything like this again. Not while I breathe. And for the first time since my rebirth, I believed him. I believed I might finally get to live. Not as a pawn. Not as a sacrifice. But as myself. I didn't sleep that night. The fire in the hearth crackled low, casting flickering shadows on the walls of our modest cottage, but I couldn't find warmth in it. I sat by the window, wrapped in Luke's oversized coat, watching the pale moon slide across the sky, chasing time I didn't want to acknowledge. The events of the day clung to me like oil. Claire's screams, Gavin's broken voice, the cold metal cuffs, the scent of blood on concrete. I kept replaying it, over and over, the way my body remembered terror, even when my mind tried to deny it. Every breath I took was a shaky negotiation with my past self. I had survived, yes, but survival didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy. It felt like guilt. Luke never left my side. He didn't push me to talk, didn't ask questions. He simply brought me a glass of warm milk, knelt beside me, and held my hand without saying a word. In that silence, his presence became the only thing tethering me to the present. By morning, I found the strength to fold away my trauma and tuck it behind the routines that had once comforted me. I swept the floor. I made tea. I scrubbed the copper pan that hadn't been used in weeks. Normalcy felt like rebellion. But when Luke told me we'd received word from the Liu family estate in Capitol Springs, and they were ready to receive us with full honors, I froze mid-stir. You want to go back? I asked quietly. He looked at me with those solemn, steady eyes. It's time. You're not meant to live in hiding, Nina. Not anymore. And neither am I. I hesitated, then nodded. Maybe leaving this village behind meant I could finally breathe without looking over my shoulder. Packing was bittersweet. Every object I folded into a trunk carried a piece of who I used to be, a girl who knelt in dirt, who had bruises beneath long sleeves, who dreamed of being seen but learned to survive by being small. I wasn't that girl anymore. And yet, I felt the weight of her watching me from the corners of the room as I sealed each case shut. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and painted the sky in golds and purples, Luke stood at the gate hitching the cart. I brought him water, and he pulled me into a gentle kiss. We leave at sunrise, he murmured against my forehead. But be careful tonight. I saw a car circling the edge of the village this afternoon. Might be nothing, but we can't take risks. His words stirred a chill in my spine, but I masked it with a smile. I'll be fine, I said. I'll double-lock the windows. You finish checking the wheels. He nodded and headed for the shed. I returned inside, latching the doors and drawing the curtains. But the moment I turned to the hallway, I felt it. A shift in the air. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but expectant. I barely had time to register movement before something struck me from behind. A wet cloth pressed against my mouth. The scent was sharp, chemical, invasive. My scream caught in my throat as the world collapsed into a black void. I awoke with my cheek pressed against cold cement. My head throbbed violently, and my limbs refused to move. I blinked through the blur and realized I was back in that damned factory, or maybe another just like it, damp walls, rusted beams, the sound of wind howling through broken glass panes above. My hands were bound, tighter this time, and my ankles too. Panic clawed at my chest. Then I heard her.
Claire.
Her voice was quieter now, but colder. No theatrics, no venom. Just a chilling monotone. You're so hard to get rid of, you know? She stepped into view, hair disheveled, mascara smudged beneath hollow eyes. Her body moved like it was borrowed, jittery, brittle. She wasn't glowing anymore. She was unraveling. You should have stayed gone, Nina. But you always come back. Always the survivor. Always the martyr. Claire. I rasped, my throat raw. You've already lost. Let me go. I didn't lose, she said sharply, walking in slow circles around me. I just need time. Time to clean the board. Time to make people forget who you are, and then maybe, I can start over. She was talking more to herself than to me. Her eyes flickered like a broken lantern. And that's when I saw a jagged kitchen knife in her trembling hand. My pulse spiked. I tried to reason with her. Claire, listen to me. There's still a way out for you. You're not well. You need help, real help. Her laugh was brittle and empty. Don't you dare talk down to me. You think you're better than me because some rich man decided to save you. She stepped closer. You think he'll still want you after I carve away all the parts he loves? My breath hitched. She raised the knife. My instinct screamed, but I couldn't move, couldn't dodge. I closed my eyes. Then gunfire shattered the air. Claire screamed. The knife clattered to the floor. I opened my eyes in time to see her slump to her knees, clutching her shoulder, crimson blooming across her dress. Luke burst into the room, face ashen, fury in his every step. Behind him, two of his family's private guards flanked the doorway, weapons still smoking. Touch her again, he said, voice like gravel, and I'll make sure you never get up. Claire whimpered, her body folding in on itself. Luke rushed to me, cutting through the ropes, his hands shaking. Nina, are you hurt? Just shaken. I managed. You're here. That's all that matters. We didn't speak again until we were in the car. The guards stayed behind to wait for the police. I looked out the window as the factory shrank in the distance. She was broken long before this life, I murmured. I just never saw it. Luke didn't respond immediately. Then he said, some people live in cages others built for them. Some build their own and lock the world out. I turned to him. And what about us? He glanced at me, then took my hand. We burned the cages down. The Liu estate welcomed us with grandeur I had never dreamed of. Marble staircases. Chandeliers that sparkled like constellations. Servants who bowed when I passed. But none of that compared to the first night I lay in our bed clean, safe, unafraid, and felt the flutter of new life stirring inside me. Luke pressed his palm to my stomach in stunned silence. We're having a baby, I whispered. He closed his eyes, resting his forehead against mine. You gave me everything, he said. And I'll spend the rest of my life giving it all back. ChatGPT said. The days blurred into warmth. Morning light spilled through silk curtains as I wandered barefoot across polished hardwood, one hand resting on the swell of my stomach while the other cradled a mug of tea that Luke insisted I drink for strength. The estate was quiet in the early hours, save for the distant hum of gardeners trimming hedges or the faint clink of porcelain from the kitchen staff. Yet inside me, there was movement, soft, fluttering kicks like whispers against the inside of my skin. Life, real and irrepressible, bloomed where pain once lived. Sometimes I paused in front of the long hallway mirror and barely recognized myself. Gone was the village girl with scraped knees and eyes hollowed by grief. The woman reflected back at me now had a spine that refused to bend, a voice that no longer trembled, and a future stretching like golden thread before her. But shadows never fully leave, do they? They linger, soft as breath on a neck, even when the sun is blazing. One afternoon, I sat in the study flipping through the latest letter from my mother. Her handwriting remained as sharp and practical as ever, but between the lines I read something deeper. Guilt, maybe, or quiet pride. "The village misses you," she wrote. "Your father's health has improved. He still refuses to eat his porridge unless I remind him you used to cook it for him with a pinch of cinnamon." I smiled, touched the page, and whispered, "I'll visit soon." I had forgiven them long ago. They were victims to fear, of tradition, of choosing one daughter while leaving the other to fate. They hadn't seen the trap until it was already sprung. The news of Claire came quietly. A nurse from the Capital Asylum sent word. Postpartum complications. Refusal to eat. Long, vacant stares. She had given birth to a girl, but the child had been taken into state custody. "She does not speak," the note read. "When she does, she calls for someone named Shurjeen." I sat still for a long time after reading that. Not out of pity. Not from satisfaction either. Just stillness, the kind that follows when the wind dies and every leaf in the forest holds its breath. Gavin never visited her. He had died the previous winter in prison during a riot between inmates. His body was buried in an unmarked grave. I didn't attend. I didn't cry. All I felt was distance, as if he had never truly been mine to begin with. It was Luke who grounded me when those ghosts tried to stir. He built a nursery on the east wing with his own hands, sanding each plank, polishing every corner. "Our child deserves a world without edges," he told me one evening as he hung painted stars above the crib. "No splinters. No jagged things." I watched him from the doorway, his sleeves rolled, curls falling over his brow, and felt a tenderness so fierce it nearly undid me. "You think you're protecting them," I said, placing a hand on my belly. "But you're protecting me too." He looked up, his smile soft. "Always." I gave birth in early spring. The rain had just stopped, leaving the sky rinsed and new, and the air smelled like soil and violets. The labor was long, grueling, but when the nurse laid that tiny, squirming body on my chest, I wept. Not just from pain or exhaustion, but from release, like something sacred had been unlocked inside me. A little girl. Her fingers were long, delicate like mine, but her eyes, when they blinked open, were all Luke, sharp and stormy, with a quiet knowing that made me shiver. We named her Mabel. It meant lovable. And she was everything. In the years that followed, the world changed slowly, as if time respected our need to heal before pushing forward. Luke expanded the shipping business, this time openly. I helped manage operations, not just as his wife, but as a partner. People who once looked at me with either scorn or suspicion now greeted me with admiration. "You're Mrs. Yates?" they'd ask, wide-eyed, and I'd smile politely, never bothering to explain that I was once nothing more than a village girl with ash on her fingers and fire in her chest. Some truths are too sharp to fit into conversation. One summer, I returned to Willow Creek. Mabel was 3, already talking in full sentences and curious about every blade of grass. The village had changed: paved roads, a new school, painted rooftops, but the old memories still clung to certain corners like dust. My mother ran into us at the market. She knelt down, eyes misting, as she brushed Mabel's curls aside. "She's got your fire," she whispered. I nodded, my throat tight. "She'll never have to burn to prove it, though." My father hugged me that night longer than he ever had, and we didn't say much. We didn't need to. Later, as we passed the graveyard, I paused in front of Claire's stone. Someone had carved her no dates, no epigraph, just that single word. I laid a lily beside it and stood there in silence. Not to grieve. Not to forgive. Just to remember. Because forgetting would have made it too easy. And I'd survived too much to pretend the scars weren't real. On our way home, Mabel leaned her head on my shoulder and asked, "Mommy, were you ever scared?" I wrapped my arm around her and whispered, "All the time." She frowned. "But you're brave now." I smiled. "Being brave doesn't mean you're never scared, sweetheart. It means you choose to keep going, even when you are." That night, I watched the firelight flicker across the nursery walls, casting soft shadows of stars and moons. Luke came in and sat beside me, his hand finding mine like it always did. "You know," he said, "I used to wonder if I'd ever find peace. But with you this, right," he writes, "all I'll ever need." I rested my head against him, heart full, no longer burdened by what could have been or what once was. Because in this life, I had reclaimed more than freedom. I had found love, built a family, and given my daughter a world where darkness wasn't her inheritance. And that, I realized, was the truest revenge of all.